Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to the Sovereign Vibe podcast, where we talk about all things spiritual, the human experience, and everything in between. I'm your host, Renee Louise, and we will be sharing personal stories on the healing journey, how to overcome trauma of all kinds, and then thusly how to feel more confident as a starseed and empath, aka the sensitive, beautiful soul that you are. Let's begin today's episode. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode. This is episode 3, and the topic we'll be working on today or discussing today is sudden transformation. And it's been a couple months since my last episode, and that has actually created this episode in terms of the importance behind it, to talk about sudden transformation and how we can navigate it and what that even means or can look like, because it can look very different. But I've been guided to bring in some examples and some tips to hopefully support you through something you've maybe already gone through, or information of how to even support another person as they're moving through sudden transformation as well. But the backstory of this is that in June of this summer, 2024, I had 3 weeks where it was massive transformation after the other. And one of it was losing a very close person in my life, then passing very suddenly, and how connected they were to my inner circle of people. And within that next week, I moved very suddenly and went into a whole new city. And then a week later, I had to let go of my cat Gatsby. And transformation doesn't have to look just like loss, right? We can have transformation when we get a new job. We can have transformation when our bodies even transform, right? Which is a little bit of a more slow progression. But the sudden transformations that we have even could be, for example, a near-death experience. So the gold in transformation is sometimes it can feel that these situations really define us, or that it's hard to see the bright side or the optimism, the gold of which these events bring to our life, especially when there is a lot of grief and loss to these transformations. So what I wanted to dive into is about the triggers that can happen when we have these transformations. Because I know for me, I've always been trying to be that person who always tried to embody how to see the silver lining or see the purpose in situations. And I think when we can get triggered with loss, especially, we can question or have a lot come to our mind. And I have a couple examples that I wrote down for triggers that we may face and how we can then flip them or see these triggers and even just allow ourselves to feel them, right? Because when we're triggered, we're actually tapping into something that we're ready to feel, or even though it's uncomfortable, we're ready to uncover more. There's always more, right? So one of the first things is that when we have these sudden transformations, maybe it's even along the spiritual journey, when all of a sudden we're hit with awareness or with a psychic expansion, right? For another example, that can happen really suddenly for a lot of us. We can question the universe. We can question our faith, especially with these darker transformations, these losses. We can question why we're being put through such grief. And the main flip side I keep getting even as I'm speaking this, and that I'm actually still processing, is that, for example, I'll use my cat Gatsby. He was such an angel. And even the women that were helping support me to let him go helped me remember that It is about the gift that that soul is bringing to us. And when they're ready to leave, they're completing the gift or the mission they had for us, the connection we had. And I think when we question why so much happens at once in our lives, for a lot of us, there is kind of this stacking of transformation, right? That doesn't feel like transformation. It feels painful. It feels like it upheavals everything that we were trying to solidify, our foundation, right? So there's a reason from that place of upheaval to create more change, to also bring to light the illusion of separation. It doesn't make us miss these souls, these beings any less. But it helps us still feel their presence even if they're not physically with us. And that's still, and grief is an ongoing process, and I'm actually guided to have an episode specifically about grief because I've been unpacking my own grief, and I want to share the little nuggets of gold that I have found, that I'm sure you all have your own nuggets of gold or different perspectives, and I want to talk about it. I think it's important to, even though it may be uncomfortable, but go into these places, right? So even when we feel like we're not supported, trusting that, even for again example with my cat, he was not, I didn't want him to keep suffering. He got really sick. He was almost 17. He had a lot of medical stuff happen the last 5 years. And it would have been selfish for me to keep continuing his life if it wasn't going to be of the highest good, right? And I think some souls are ready to leave when we're even least ready, or think we're ready, right? So another part of this that can come up as a trigger is having trouble feeling connected to joy. When we're hit with transformation, maybe it's even getting fired suddenly or being let go. All the worries come in and we feel covered in darkness, so it's hard to connect to joy. So how do we do that? How do we find ways of connecting to joy? And the smallest thing, and it may seem very basic, but what I have been working towards is finding little things to be so grateful for. Grateful for the time I had, grateful for the women, the people around me through the process of this transformation. And sorry, I'm getting emotional, but it's part of the talking about it, sharing it. It helps us feel it, right? And maybe that's why I've been putting this episode off, because I didn't want to be so vulnerable and real, because it's just a lot. But the little bits of gratitude can help us find joy. Remembering the positive aspects and not just the pain that we feel, the grief, but still feeling the grief. So if we suppress the grief, if we suppress the contrast, it only makes it bigger, it only makes it hurt more, right? So within that, another trigger can connect to feeling alone, feeling lost. And sometimes we need to be in the void, even though it sucks. And what do I need being in the void? The void of feeling disconnected from the universe, disconnected from others, maybe needing to isolate. But sometimes, and at least from my own experience, being in that deep place of darkness brings the most light on the other side. Sometimes we keep digging down deeper so we can grow our roots even more into ourselves, into the world, into what we really value. So again, embracing the void and trusting, it's as if we're being planted. That these transformations help us to get like a seed in the soil, that we can sprout anew, that there is a reason these shifts, these sudden transformations happen, right? It's even the phoenix rising from the ashes type energy, which I know can feel very cliche when you're in the pain or in the trigger, right? And then another trigger that I wrote down was we're causing to search for meaning in life, right? And then that's when we can discover what is more in aligned with our values. And for me, all of this death and rebirth energy has helped me take better care of myself, to value my life, because life is so short, to value and try to be as much in the present moment as possible. My self-care has amplified, and I don't think I would have shifted my focus if these things didn't happen in the way that they did, right? And within this, the beauty also of transformations is that when we actually ask for, our dreams or what we're really desiring, it can show us everything that's not working, everything that's not really serving us, but actually might be our comfort zones. And that within and of itself is asking us to transform. And it's not pretty. Like on the spiritual journey, when we're wanting a more aligned partner or we're wanting a more aligned job, that's when we can suddenly lose our job that's not in alignment. Or all of a sudden not want to be around certain people, but they're the only people we have, so we need to be alone. The transformation is the whole journey, right? It's not just the end result, even though a lot of what we're brought up to believe is that the transformation is fluffy and happy, and then when we're hit with reality, we're like, what is this I signed up for? I didn't sign up for this life. This is different. So I invite you to maybe reflect, and as I know, even as I'm saying this, there are certain aspects of my transformational journey, not even just this isolated set of events, right? But there are other aspects that we can sometimes bypass. And that only leads to us holding on to grief or holding on to feeling that the universe maybe isn't supporting us because it didn't go the way we wanted, or we had a different expectation of how our lives would look. So I invite you to reflect on whatever may be brought up for you as you're listening or watching on YouTube here. And I also invite you through this reflection to know that as we're doing this work of reflecting, it already is an alchemy in and of itself, because everything is happening now, right? And I'm even getting the example of like the inner child healing we can do. For example, when we're little kids, there's a lot of transformation that happens. Maybe even, for example, it's parents getting divorced. That's a huge transformation. It may not feel like it. It's just considered blanketly a divorce. But your life changes. It's a transformation. And to maybe unpack, if that's not the case, right, but whatever it resonates for you, to reflect on what are some other little ways you can find gratitude in that situation, or even ask, what else is there maybe that you need to know? Right? Because every little thing that has happened to us makes us who we are today, in this now moment. Right? And I think as we allow ourselves to expand more and more and show up more authentically and find even forgiveness within ourselves about how we handle certain situations. Like, for example, in the past, if it was the old me that had these huge 3 things happen in less than a month, I would have handled it so differently, and it probably wouldn't have been the most healthiest way of coping. And that, again, is still okay, right? Because, again, even in that time, I was self-numbing in ways that I knew weren't the best. But sometimes we need to numb ourselves to survive, to be able to take it moment by moment and process it later instead of being fully consumed by whatever the situation is. Right? But I know in the past, if it was the old me, I would have numbed to the point of like being 24/7 stoned, drunk, whatever, like out of not wanting to feel. Because as sensitive beings, we feel so much. And it can be overwhelming. It can feel like a burden to feel a lot and be aware of so much. It gets me emotional because sometimes I hit that point where it's like, why do I have to be this aware sometimes? So even seeing that transformation of who we are, the power we have behind being so emotionally tapped in, emotionally aware, right? It is such a gift. It is a superpower, but it's how we take care of ourselves that makes it more of our strength and less of our weakness and our reason to self-soothe constantly and be afraid, right? I hope that makes sense. Take that as you will. Please let me know too, and I'm going to have a little warning before this. Not necessarily warning, but kind of a trigger warning. Like, we're talking about triggers. We're talking about a lot today, right? And again, I think I've been putting this episode off, even though I felt joy about bringing things into the light and talking about them. But I want people that come to this podcast or come to my channel wherever we meet or whatever to feel safe enough to decide if they want to come into that space of talking about these things, right? We don't always have to go into it, especially if we have a lot of more sensitivity that's more raw on our hearts. So, yeah, I appreciate you all so much, and even through my personal transformation in this small example, again, my life has shifted so much for the better. Even though there's still obviously grief coming forward. I think we hold, and I think some people put our decisions or our transformations in like a niche or a box, and could be like, oh, you went through that 5 years ago, you should be over it by now. Why are you getting emotional? We could even say that kind of stuff to ourselves, right? But grief is a lifetime process. These situations that happen to us impact our lives, impact our body, impact everything. They may even trigger past life stuff, right? There might be so many layers that every time we cry, we're releasing a new layer. So it's being compassionate with ourselves and embracing what's coming up, even if we feel crazy. Maybe it's journaling to help get out what we're feeling, talking to someone that can support us wherever we're at, right? There's so many different, maybe music I'm hearing in that way of helping us feel into the emotion or help us shift into a new way of transformation around the situation. There's no wrong or right way to handle these big things in our lives, right? And we do the best we can, and it's trusting that even though that whole saying, we're only given as much as we can handle, and sometimes it feels like way too much, we can still look back and see that we did handle it. We're here. Right? We may be still picking up the pieces and trying to understand more, but we're so resilient as humans and as sensitive souls and as galactic beings within our human experience, right? It's crazy the amount of things that we're living in the contrast of. It's insane to me still. All right, I feel guided to pull a card for us today to kind of end this off, working with my Oracle deck, Sovereign Vibrations Oracle. Just feel guided to see what card supports us in terms of transformation. Clear. And I'll read the description to you if you're listening on any of the podcast platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the card. Let's see, what card are we meant to connect with in terms of this episode today? We get the air card, the element of air. And the affirmation is, I am in tune and connected to the highest aspects of non-physical reality. My mind and thoughts are clear and at peace. I love this card because in terms of the connection with this episode, when we have transformation, there's a lot going on in the non-physical. There's so much happening behind the scenes that we don't see, that we can't see as humans, even as very aware humans, right? And it's having a way of trusting that our thoughts don't have to come in and rush, and even though they will sometimes, right? The thoughts can try to understand and make sense and try to keep us safe, or even play out the worst case scenario, right? But to remind ourselves that the non-physical intelligence, the sacred intelligence within our universe, within the earth, within our bodies, it's guiding us like the wind. We can't see it, but we can feel it, which is a Walk to Remember reference, but I love that movie. It's so good. Oh, talk about a crier. That's a good cry movie. But yeah, I keep hearing this way too, that it's helping even these transformations. It clears our mind. It clears, like how we spoke about these triggers. It allows us to process through the mind and our body as we move through these big transformations. I feel guided for one more card actually on the bottom. I got the heart chakra. And the affirmation is, I trust the direction of my heart's calling. I am divinely guided and unconditionally loved. So I'm hearing in this way too that every transformation we have is actually another way of expanding our hearts. And that can also be why it's so painful, because when we expand our heart, it's like growing muscle. It's painful to expand, but yet there is so much sweetness. There's so much connected to it. So I keep hearing that way. Trust that you're doing exactly what you're meant to do and exactly who you're meant to be at this time. Underneath that, we had the root chakra too. So grounding in a whole new way of heart and like root chakra, right? We're clearing our root, our way of survival, to be more heart-centered. Through every transformation we have, it helps us clear the old to invite in the new, and I'm hearing it within that way of the air, the new coming in for us. Oh, I love it. And then the violet flame card underneath. Purification. All right, my loves. I appreciate you all so much. I hope that this was supportive. Stay tuned for next week's episode. And please feel free to comment or reach out to me via email, or work with me if you'd feel guided to work with me. I have channeling sessions available, healing sessions, and my Oracle deck is available for purchase. We ship worldwide. And yeah, keep on doing the amazing human experience journey, my friend. You got this. You got this. Thank you for everything you're doing. And especially the things that no one is congratulating you for or praising you for. This deep work of breaking cycles, of healing generational stuff, of healing from loss, all of it. I see you. I thank you. I love you. Bye, everybody. See you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Sovereign Vibe podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. This podcast is sponsored by the Sovereign Vibrations Oracle Deck, a 63-card deck paired with sound healing music and guidebook where you can access over 8 hours of meditation music and get an exclusive free 30-minute reading upon purchase. If you feel guided to connect and have more guidance along your journey, please go to www.sovereignvibrations.com to book a free consultation call or any healing or channeling services available. Follow us on Instagram at Sovereign Vibe and YouTube at Sovereign Vibrations Renee Louise. Hope you have a beautiful day wherever you may be in the world, and stay tuned for next week's episode right here on the Sovereign Vibe podcast. Stay sovereign, you beautiful soul. Love you.